Definitely got that small town vibe. Yep. And this is about where the high school was in this area. This whole section right here. Hey everybody, this is my friend Joaquin hanging out.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
We're down here in Lehigh. This is downtown Lehigh, where Laura Aime, we have since figured out, more than likely disappeared. She had, I'll turn it around here so we can get a better look at it. She was staying with her friend Marin Beveridge, who does not go by that name anymore, but lives in an area called Duchesne by Vernal. But this was the high school area, apparently over here, this block where supposedly Ted saw Laura for the first time. And Marin was there. She remembers seeing him and coming up to the group and talking with a few of the boys. One of them, the Bauer boys. Apparently all these kids are dead, the Bauer brothers, which is unfortunate because it would be interesting to talk to them. But anyway, so what's interesting, according to Marin, she lived at 165 North, which is, if you get on Google Maps, it's basically just right here. You're looking at it. This is where her house was. And it's interesting, I haven't found any pictures of that house yet, but I'm gonna keep looking. But according to Marin, Laura walked down this street to go to the Naughty Pine, which was called Mo Brown's by the locals because the guy that owned the place was named Leon Brown, and he had a huge mole on his face, and so they called it Mo Brown's, which is really confusing if you're researching this case because a lot of people don't know this cafe as the Naughty Pine. They know it as Brown's Cafe. But according to Marin, all the locals called it Mo Brown's. And I've actually spoken to other locals that referred to it as Mo Brown's as well, because of his mole. Anyway, she walked down this street, and Marin claims it was about 11 o'clock actually, because Mo Brown's would close at 11. And just walked right around this corner here. I'll show you where it was. Main Street in Lehigh. Oh man, those windows. I gotta clean this shit. Walked right around the corner, and this building right here with the red Spanish tile rooftop on the left-hand side was the Naughty Pine. And according to Marin, her sister, who worked at Naughty Pine, actually saw Ted pull up and pick up Laura. That's the story. So anyway, there you go. This is the area. And this is confirmed by a lot of locals that have told me that that was indeed the Naughty Pine and 148 North Main Street. Anyway, there you go. Naughty Pine.
Foosball. This is, they had foosball tables back there.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So
Back when it was a restaurant.
Snooker, and drink.
Yeah, billiards.
Billiards.
Okay.
And foosball when you tend to come in here.
Well, you know what's kind of interesting? You see how it says 130 on top of the door? The address is 130.
Yeah.
When you the Naughty Pine was 148. This side of the building was the Naughty Pine. So it's like sectioned off into two buildings. This is actually 148. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. The other side. My bad. And they've changed them a little bit.
120 to 130.
And they've changed the addresses slightly. They've moved stuff around a little bit. I believe so. That's
Not that
Yeah, they
building
took
there.
two separate ones and made it one.
Yeah,
and
okay.
not that building though. That is definitely not it. I mean, you can see this being a little.
You can see the wall. There's a wall here. Look. See the wall.
Oh yeah. See?
See here.
And this is old.
Yeah.
This is old.
So
This would have been
wall. Yeah.
going all the way back. Yeah. Howdy.
Hey guys.
Hi.
What you doing?
What are you guys up to?
Just through history. We know the points.
For some history stuff.
4 years ago.
Okay.
This is a different building 4 years ago.
It was, yeah, long years ago. This was a different building.
Yeah.
This section.
That was the section was different from that section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what's in here now? Or is it just...
Yeah, all of us are businesses.
Oh, this is yours?
Yeah.
Oh, do you mind if we pop in and take a look, or?
Well, you don't have any. No customers today. So you guys are part of the historical society here, or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, basically, we're researchers for a book, actually.
Yeah, we're from Australia.
Okay.
Do you care if I walk around back there, or are you just nobody allowed back there?
You know, I prefer. So I prefer you guys chat with some of the other businesses before I give permission, because there's other businesses here as well.
Oh,
So-
gotcha.
I apologize. Yeah, I know this building was built in the 1850s. This used to be two different buildings,
Yeah.
and then there's several different businesses. I'm the chiropractor here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so might be good to come back on a day when there's a lot of businesses here, and then you guys can ask permission about that.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Yeah, we'll come back when you're not here.
And there's a door.
The door will probably be locked if that's the case.
The back door goes out to the parking lot in the back. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did one of you guys just have a business here?
No.
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 It's just history. Just looking at
Well,
There's a history, it's a history thing.
You can see the firewall right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's brick wall, like you can see it on the back of some of these other businesses.
Yeah.
No, the truth, if you want to know the truth is,
Yeah.
one of Ted Bundy's victims was here and she left here and he picked her up.
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy,
Yeah.
yes. This used to be called the Naughty Pine. And that's why we're kind of interested in seeing it. It was a restaurant and
cafe. It's like a cafe.
there's a cafe, like an old
Billiards.
They had-
Foosball.
foosball tables in the back.
Yeah.
Apparently. That's kind of what I want to see what the back looked like. Okay.
If you guys want to look around,
Okay,
go ahead.
all right, now we got permission.
We'll be nice to you guys, yeah.
But
Like I said, I feel bad about, just because the other businesses don't have, we're probably not going to get
No,
a
we're-
building besides my 2 rooms. So I'm here and up there.
oh, no problem. We're not going to touch anything.
Yeah.
Just appreciate it, sir.
It's just more the back door.
Here's the old bathrooms.
It's the old bathrooms. Yeah.
The old bathrooms for the restaurant.
Yep. And that would have been the back door come out here. And this one,
That's the back
This-
door
this
out to
one-
the alley.
that's
Yeah.
the one I want to see. Those.
Yep.
Okay. So this.
Look at the Volkswagen too.
Oh,
back
should
there.
take a shot of that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
This back door here. They would. This is the way they would come out. Darren would have gone this way. Back door this way.
Yeah, she'd probably just bounce down around the corner here. Yeah, exactly. I can totally see them all standing out here smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and.
Yeah.
But this is this would have been the Naughty Pine.
Hey.
It's very interesting. Huh?
Researching the life of Ted Bundy.
Yeah, we actually published the book on it. We just
We've actually.
put it in
Well,
second,
Rob is
put
the
it out in
author.
second edition. So we
Okay.
just come out from Australia to do the tour.
Yeah, you can see the brick wall back there.
Yeah.
You can see it for sure in these 2 suites, and you can see it
Yeah.
slightly on mine.
Yeah.
They added on. This used to be 2 different buildings.
Yeah,
I believe it
that's
was built in the 1850s originally, both the buildings.
Yeah.
This hallway was put in completely. It used to be a dirt street, from what I understand.
Interesting. You.
There's a basement only under this side, no basement under this side.
Basement on here.
Yep, on this side.
Yeah.
All of this side has a cohesive.
That's right. We got Chuck Meeks. Rock dealing Bert. Old stuff. People come down here and rock climb and stuff. I'll show you it later if you want to see it.
Okay. Well, and so this is what's kind of interesting about this road. You can see that it's a power line corridor.
Okay.
So what we're walking on, I mean, there's other historic levels to what this area is, but during that time period, this is a power line access.
So this would have been active back then.
Well, you're using active in like a really liberal way.
Well, like, I mean, people would have been coming down here and accessing
Well, the
it.
power line, the power company comes through. They're going to make sure that it's clear
Right,
for the power line,
right,
and they're going to come through maybe once or twice a year.
right.
What it is now, and what I'm guessing probably wasn't at that time period, is now it's becoming a big climbing area, and you'll see that in just a second.
Okay,
There's like a big, nice, shady climbing wall
okay.
right there. So, but I don't know that that was really a thing then.
Well, and what I've read from police reports is she was found by a couple of hikers on this side of the river.
And looking that way.
Looking down that way, specifically. So would this have been a hiking trail back then, do you think?
No. Like,
Okay.
It's never been a hiking
It's never
trail.
been one.
Historically this is in the 1870s,
Yeah.
there was a narrow gauge railroad that
Railroad.
came up this canyon. And so the roadbed became the rail line.
Gotcha.
And so it diverted any other traffic,
Gotcha.
horseback, wagons, elsewhere. So you'll see these like slightly wider trails
Yeah.
that were used during those late 1800s.
Right.
And now they're heavily regrown, but at the same time, you can still see that this is...
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's what it was. I think they're just running around back.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think too. Okay.
Well, and quite honestly, I mean, I guess the next question would be the people that reported it. Who were they and what were they? Because, like, I don't know about the 1970s, but there's certainly been areas of this canyon that were known for like the teen gathering, drink and smoke weed kind of a thing.
Right.
And quite honestly, this wouldn't be a bad place. Well, and so I think that I think this has been an actively used area, but it's not like people are like, I'm going to go hike 5 miles this way.
Right.
Because you're going to see this is going to peter out really.
Right. So it's pretty steep.
But on the other side or this side?
On the other side, where's our first one? Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it, isn't it?
Yeah, this area.
Remember the photos the guys are down there working on that slope?
Yep.
So he drove his car just to there and rolled it down there.
Either that or he pulled up over there, Rob, turned around, came back.
Came back and then, came back. So when you come back, we'll stop this there.
Yes.
And we'll stop this there on the side. So this is about right. We stop there, tossed it down here.
Yep.
It would have been just down there somewhere.
Somewhere down in this area.
That is so fucking exposed, man, but then it's snowing, right?
Right.
So that's exposed. That's not concealed. That's not a concealed body.
Well, and the trees there would have been far less, leaf.
From his point of view, the thing is, would have he known about the trail coming down here? That's the thing. See, from his point of view, let's say he's going up. Oh, it's snowing. I've got to get out of here. I'll turn back, come back. Right, get rid of it.
Yeah.
But how well does he know this area? Does he know that people go here? That it's right there.
Yeah.
Does he know that people walk around here and they're going to see it? Right?
That's the question. Yeah.
Some background information. Got a call from Mike Fisher,
Yeah.
who was Pitkin County investigator in Colorado.
Yes.
And they were putting together a conference, and I invited individuals who had unsolved homicides to come to this conference.
Okay.
And so we had by then, the sheriff's office had been investigating the case involving Laura Aime. They found her up American Fork Canyon. And so they went through and they asked, and you know, one of the problems with investigators is nobody divulges anything.
Yeah.
And so they don't tell anything about their case. And so, you know, the condition is that everybody would come and bring their files and everything on each one of the unsolved homicides that they were involved in. And so we got there, and again, became apparent after 2 or 3 presentations. There's people out of Oregon, other places in Colorado, that they had unsolved homicides. And so they, same MO, you know, same cause of death, how the body was discovered, where the body was located, what had happened. Post-mortem to the body, it was all similar. And so we, we started looking and saying, hey, you know, there's something here, that there's an individual who's involved in this. And I think at that time it was like, if I remember right, it was somewhere like 22 unsolved homicides. All same MO, same body. Some of, there was other homicides, but they had never located the body.
Okay.
In other words, the missing, Debbie Kent, for example, was one of them.
Yes. Yeah.
So I, at that time, Noel said, hey, we've got a couple of unsolved homicides, and one of them was this Laura Aime. And so he said, why don't you find out what's going on with that? So I went over to the sheriff's office, and I got the cold shoulder. Nobody wanted to talk to me, and part of that was, as the lead investigator, jumped on the case in the beginning, and then it went cold, and then he dropped it. So I went to one of the deputy sheriffs who was working on the detective side that I knew very well, and he said, hey, there's problems with that case. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, Owen was the lead investigator, a guy by the name of Owen Kornberg.
Okay.
And he said he screwed up the case, and Dick Smith was the one I was talking to.
Yeah. Okay.
And so there was a meeting. The FBI flew out with somebody from their lab, and we met. Mike Fisher came out of Colorado, and they had, at that time, they had transferred. They charged him with this homicide of Carolyn Campbell.
Oh.
And he was in detention in Glenwood Springs. And so they're trying to put together, because they got a preliminary hearing coming up, and so they said, we're going to have this meeting. In the meantime, Mike Fisher's people, Ted sold his Volkswagen, and they bought it from the guy who had purchased it from Ted.
Yeah.
And we loaded it up in the back of a U-Haul truck, and Mike drove it back to CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, where they stripped the car down. And they found down, because one of the things the neighbors said during the search warrant, that he was meticulous, and periodically he would take the seats out and spray the inside of the Volkswagen out with a hose.
Yeah.
And so the FBI guy said, hey, we've got a whole bunch of hair that we found down inside of the passenger, not too much in the driver's side, but in the passenger's window down along the runners. And he said, have you got any hair samples? He says to me. And I said, well, I've talked to the investigator, and he said they've got hair, they've got a plaster cast of where this vehicle had pulled up against this kind of hill. If you go up to American Fork Canyon,
yeah,
just past where the Temp Cave, where you go up and hike up to to Bonotus Cave, on the left-hand side, it's a couple hundred feet up further east. There's a pull out there, and her body was right up over the top of that lane, about halfway between that hill and the river. That's where, and the fact is, I got called out and went up there, and it was on a Thanksgiving day. That's when somebody found them. Kids were up there hiking and found the body. So anyway, he had plaster casts. They had some other evidence, and so I said to the FBI guy, well, let me get that stuff to you, and I'll send it back to you. Now, just a little postscript to all of this. The sheriff, who was Mac Hawley at the time, refused to admit. As a matter of fact, he wrote a book after he retired where he said Ted Bundy was never involved in the Laura Aime case. I had an intern guy who went over and interviewed some people, and we found some people over there. It was called Brown's Cafe over in Lehigh.
Yeah.
And he had 2 or 3 people identified him as an individual who had been in there.
Yes.
And one was this girl. And of course, the sheriff's office, I reported back to Dick. Dick told Owen about it. Owen told the sheriff. The sheriff said, hey, that's not true. That's BS. That he was never involved in that. And he started talking about, the hysteria, Ted Bundy, everybody, he's everywhere. And so I wrote a letter, an official request, and directed it to Owen Kornberg and a copy to the sheriff to ask if I could get access to all the evidence. Never heard a word. They just ignored me.
Wow. Okay.
Their office was located from mine. And so one day, Owen was walking down the hall, and I said, "Hey, Owen, how come you haven't responded to my letter?" And he just kind of hummed and hawed around it, and I thought, oh, there's something up. So I said to Dick, "What's going on?" And Dick said, "Well, when we moved office, they threw away all the evidence."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Unsolved homicide. So Noel calls the sheriff in, and the sheriff comes in with Owen, and I'm there. And so Noel asks him, "Where's the evidence?" And he said, "Well, I think evidence is really not evidence until it's presented in the court." And Noel said, "Oh, no.
Max said that.
Evidence is what you gather at the scene, and I want to see it. And I'm the county attorney, and I'm the chief law enforcement officer in this county, and you may think you are because of your sheriff, but you're not. And if I don't get it, I'm going to file charges against you, Mac. You decide."
Wow.
And of course, we knew the story, and we wanted to hear them say, "Hey, we threw it away." And there's this big pause in there, and I said, "Mac, Owen destroyed it, didn't he?" And he goes, "Well, it's not been found, so I don't know where it is." And I said, no. I said, "This is not a game." I said, "I've got an FBI guy back in Washington who needs to get some evidence there to assist Colorado on this homicide case." And he said, "No." He said, "Well, we don't have it." So I went back to the Aime family, and they lived over in American Fork at the time, and down this dirt road. And I went down there, and I had met with them prior, and they said, "Sheriff's office came here." He said, "I thought there was a report of an unidentified girl up in American Fork Canyon. I called the sheriff and said, what color's her hair? They wouldn't tell me." He said, "I just had this feeling it was my daughter, because she had a tendency to take off." And the sheriff's office said, "We're not gonna answer." So he said, "I go to bed at night." He said, "I have this terrible dream. It's my daughter." So I go over and I demand to see the sheriff. And the sheriff said, "Well, and finally they said, well, she's dark haired, and but we don't know what her, and of course they'd done her fingerprints, but she'd never been fingerprinted. And so they didn't have any identification for him. So he said, "I want to go up to the medical examiners where the body was and look at this person." And so the sheriff said, "Oh, you can do what you want." And so he says, I drive up to the car, and it was my daughter. And he said, and he's crying when he tells me the story. So he said, the sheriff's office comes to me, they send an investigator, and he said he was really a jerk. And I said, "Was his name Owen?" He goes, yeah, that was what his name was. Oh, he said, "I told him my story about, where she goes and where she frequents. And one of the places she went was at the Browns Cafe." And so, anyway, I said, "Okay, now here's the big problem." I said, "We need to exhume her. We need to get a hair sample, some DNA off of her." And I said, "We can get a court order to do that, or we can do it with your permission. You tell us what you want to do." And the guy said, "Well, I'll give you my permission. It'll be on the safe side so that we wouldn't have any problems." We got a court order on top of it. She was buried out in Mount Pleasant. We went out there. Medical examiner was there. Sexton was there. A couple of other officers from Sanpete County was there, and dug up the body and opened up the casket, got a hair sample, got it whatever he needed, put her back in the ground. sent the air samples back there. Said they're a match, but not to the exclusion of other people. DNA, we didn't test. Of course, it was new back then, and they didn't really know how to do it.
Right.
And and that was where it's at. And of course, he then, when he was trying to bargain at the end, when they were going to kill him, of course, he said, yeah, he had kidnapped Debbie Kent, and he had killed Laura Aime. And we were just trying to tie some physical evidence to Bundy. I went out to the preliminary hearing and I went into his cell, and of course he'd been Mirandized 1,000 times, and I gave it to him again, and I said, and he said, "Are you here to talk about Laura Aime?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He says, "I don't have anything," and then said, "Get the whatever out of there." And he wouldn't talk to me. That was that was when they were holding him up in Aspen.
Oh, in Aspen. Okay.
Yeah, the preliminary hearing was going on. It was just before we started.
Okay.
We brought the officer from Salt Lake County, and I forget what his name was, but he and I and Laura Aime flew out together. Not Laura Aime, geez. Carol Durange.
Was it, oh, you flew out with Carol Durange. Okay.
Yeah.
Was it,
Yeah. And
I'm sorry,
great.
Was it Jerry Thompson?
Yeah, Jerry Thompson was the guy.
Okay.
Yeah, we flew out, and it was great because we flew into Denver and then caught, I think it was a DC-8 or 9. It was one of those two propeller jobbers, and they're flying that into Aspen. And so it starts going down the runway, and just before it lifts off, it blows a tire.
Oh man.
Yeah, we kind of did the 160 there on the runway. So they just lifted us up on the runway and ran out a truck and tire, pumped it up, put a new tire on. The pilot said, "Okay, we'll try this again." And so yeah, we flew into Aspen. We were there for a couple of days, and of course, Carol Durange took the stand, and boy, talk about a wonderful witness.
Yeah.
Did you identify him? And he said, yeah. And that's when we got the famous, Mike Fisher and I went to Toronto, Canada, and interviewed some people who were on the same floor there at Snowmass.
Yeah.
And we interviewed this lady. She was in her, I'm going to say, late 50s, early 60s. And she identified him and said, yeah, he was down kind of hanging on by the elevator, and he had his arm in a cast, which was one of the ruses he used,
yeah,
to get some help, to come out and help me in my car. And so she identified him, and we had her sign the back of the picture. We showed her 5 photographs. One of them was him. And so she identifies him, and so she's flown out for a preliminary hearing, and she takes the stand. And did some people come out? Oh yeah, and 2 people, and very nice to me. And were you able to identify a photograph? Yes. And is there anybody in the courtroom? Oh, so he shows a photograph to her, and he says, "Is this the photograph?" And she looked at it, and he said, "Now turn over the back." And she turns over the back and said, "Yeah, that's my handwriting. Yeah, that's the person." Now, is there anybody in the courtroom who resembles this person? She looks around, and the bailiff was standing in the back. And she said, "Yeah, it's that guy right back there." Bundy's lawyer jumps up and says, "Let the record reflect he is identified the bailiff." And she there's the prosecutor sitting there, Mike Fisher sitting there, I'm sitting back on the front row, and then there's the defense lawyer and Bundy, and one bailiff back there.
Wow.
And she picks the bailiff. I mean, it's just terrible, terrible. But boy, Durant's got up there, and of course on cross-examination, defense lawyer got up and said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "I'll never forget him. Yeah. I'll never forget him." So the exact location of where she disappeared from, I don't remember that specific location. She had been in Lehigh in I think a cafe or something like that, and that's where we always suspected that, Bundy connected with her. Yeah. But where he actually picked her up from, I don't know that we ever established that.
Okay.
And if I remember all the details correctly, two BYU students, a boy and a girl that were hiking American Fork Canyon, were the ones that found the body and called us on it. Yeah. And it was quite a turn of events that got us to Bundy, although we suspected him fairly early on. It took a little while before we could actually nail anything down. There was a few little problems with how we located all that, because I had one detective assigned to do that part of the casework, and when it all came down, it turned out that he missed a couple of things, and so I had to send another detective out to kind of put everything together there. But wasn't there a book that was written about him? Wow, that's a long time ago.
That's true.
So some of the things that I remember is I think that we originally we connected Bundy to it more just because Salt Lake agencies up there were looking at him for similar crimes, and we just started looking at him, and then we never did nail down anything concrete on him for quite a while. If you have any access to old news reports or any of the books that were written about it, yeah. We suspected that he had, I think it was a little Volkswagen Bug or something like that, yeah. That he was driving at the time. And Salt Lake didn't make the connection for a while, and when they did, he sold the vehicle.
Right.
And then they were able to go and get access to it, and even with that, we still found some hair samples that were in the car that matched Laura and Aime. And but by the time we made those connections and things, she'd already been buried, and so we had to exhume the body, and the family was just beside themselves, and it was really sad for them. I've always felt bad about them.
Oh yeah.
About the parents.
Them.
I don't know if her mom and dad are still down there or not. They weren't that old when all this started. Now tell me the year again.
1974.
74, and that's just an interesting thing about this is that in 1974, in April, I made sergeant with the sheriff's department. It was the first promotional exam that had ever been given. Okay. And so they'd never had a formal detective division in the Utah County Sheriff's Department up until that time.
Okay.
And so, and it's kind of unique. I'm not trying to impress you or anything.
Oh, no.
But it was the first time they'd ever given a written exam, and I got the top score of everybody in the whole entire department, including the sheriff. So the sheriff said, "You've only got 3 years on the department." I'd only been a deputy sheriff for 3 years. He said, "I'm not going to make you a lieutenant, but I will make you a sergeant, and I will let you choose your assignment." And I said, I'd like to start a detective division. So he let me be a sergeant, and he started the detective division with me being the sergeant, and then I had 2 detectives that worked for me. So we had a 3-man detective division that essentially was comprised of 3 former patrol deputies with no real investigative experience. And Laura and Aime was one of the first cases we ever got. And we were absolutely ignorant of what we should have done as far as detectives are concerned, and I've always felt bad about that. But years later, after I'd been to a number of schools and had a number of cases under my belt, I actually taught a criminalistics class up at BYU as kind of an adjunct faculty, and that was one of the reasons that I went and did that, is because I wanted people to understand, about what a real investigation was supposed to look like.
Yeah.
So, but Laura and Aime's always been kind of a painful experience. Yeah, and the interesting thing, at the time we established the investigations division in '74, Mac Hawley was a wonderful guy, loved him to death. But he was an English major in college, and he ran his a retail business over in Spanish Fork. And Dick Chappell, who'd been the previous sheriff, went to Mac Hawley. I don't even know how they knew each other, but he went and said, "Mac, I'd like you to come and be my chief deputy." So Mac Hawley had 0 experience in law enforcement and no education in law enforcement. And the other guys that were in there were essentially all appointed guys, the 2 top guys in there. So that department had never really had any real trained investigators until, me and my other 2 guys started going off to schools.
Oh, man, and then boom, Laura Aime falls right in your lap.
Yeah,
oh, man.
Yeah, and then the crazy thing that happened was about the time that Bundy escaped from Colorado, the jail out there, and ended up in Florida. We were still working some of the forensic sides of Laura and Aime's case with the idea in mind that we might still be able to put, the 2 of them together and maybe make a murder case for against him for Laura and Aime. And then, of course, they caught him in Florida, and the story from there. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I would tell you this, there was a little contention between the Utah County Sheriff's Department and Salt Lake on the cases, but there were, I don't know if you've read anything about it, but Bundy had this theory, and he said, if you want to commit the perfect crime and get away with it, commit it in one jurisdiction, evidence in another jurisdiction, body in another jurisdiction. So he proved that it worked, because he spread those cases over several jurisdictions. Like, if he picked her up in Lehigh, killed her, dropped her body in Utah County, because at the time, none of the law enforcement agencies around here had a real good organized working relationship, especially on major cases like that. So
that's interesting. Wow. That talks about premeditation right there. Wow.
Oh yeah. He was an absolute horrible killer. But yeah. And it was interesting because several years later, maybe 7 or 8 years later, I got a call from somebody down in the Sanpete County area, and they had found an engraving on a tree down there that with Ted Bundy's name on it. Mm-hmm. And so we passed that information on to Salt Lake and to the other agencies up there to see maybe if the missing body might still be down there in the mountains.